So here's what we're going to talk about today. It's the new simple DVT module that has been proposed and accepted to the DAO. We're going to talk about what this module is, why it should be added to the protocol, a couple factors to consider around economics, risk mitigation, and then we're going to go pretty deep into what the timeline looks like around this. So simple DVT, what is it? So this is the second module that we added to the Lido protocol following the addition of the staking router in this prior May. And very importantly, what this will do is leverage the existing design of the curated module, which, when you think of Lido, you think of the curated module. This is the 37 node operators that run validators using the protocol, and basically this will be copied and created as the second module, utilizing the processes that the Lido contributor team, the Obel team, the SSV team have all developed over prior testnets. So we've currently done 2 testnets in the past. There was one most recently in this last spring, where we had 70 non-Lido node operators participate, many of these being solo and community stakers. We've just kicked off our third round of testnets. We have a bunch of people participating in the Obel side so far. We'll talk more about that. And SSV is going to be kicking off later this week as well. So, as I've mentioned, and this is really the point that I get most excited about, it's the point that I think when I speak with community members, when I speak with other Lido contributors, we're all fired up about, right? This module is going to bring on a ton of new solo stakers, community stakers, other professional node operators, also include members of the curated set. But in general, the goal here is to include as many people as possible and really give people an opportunity to use Lido to run validators. So initially, the module is planned to be capped at 0.5% of total Lido stake. That's 1,350 validators, give or take like 20, depending on where stake is today. It is possible that that threshold could be raised slightly, but there's a few key points on this slide. So this is not by any means intended to be used for indefinite use. The module is really here to battle test DVT on mainnet. It's a fairly new technology, and then it will be wound down within 2 to 3 years. And the reason this is because this is just a stepping stone on the way to more scalable modules utilizing DVT with permissionless elements, right? So in the future, you could think of Obel, you could think of SSV, having custom-built, purpose-built modules that are really scalable, allow any solo staker, community staker to participate in different ways. But this is a really good way to start bringing on new node operators to the protocol in such a way that they can participate and also really stress test DVT. The module will have a 10% reward share, very similar to the existing module. 8% of that will go to node operators and DVT provider, 2% to Lido. We'll talk a little bit more about that too. So why should simple DVT be added? First off, and I've sort of touched on this, DVT in my opinion, and I think in many people's opinions, is the fastest way to bring on new node operators to the protocol, right? So if you just think about what the initial proposal calls for, there's a testnet performance period. If that goes well and the module is actually brought online, we would start with 24 clusters, 12 being Obel, 12 being SSV, generally with a 5 of 7 threshold. Assume that at least 6 of those are non-Lido curated members. That's immediately 144 new node operators participating in the protocol versus the curated set today, which is 37 node operators. So you're talking 400% growth off of a small number, but it's really significant, right? And if you think about what the 0.5% cap allows for, maybe within the next 8 months, you're thinking about around 360 total node operators. If you added a significant amount of that through net new node operators, that's 800% growth in 8 months in the count of node operators. And these node operators, under this threshold, could be running 25 validators each in distributed clusters. It's a really, really exciting first step, in my opinion. Number 2 is DVT really has the potential to improve the decentralization, distribution, and resilience of infrastructure, right? And so when I think of DVT, and I spend a lot of time with our teams, in general at Lido, thinking about validators at a macro level, thinking about the validator node operator metrics that the Lido contributor team puts together every quarter, looking at clients, geos. But when you look at DVT, right, you can really take this down and break it down at the micro. And that's pretty cool for a number of reasons. So from a resilience perspective, you might have 3 solo stakers using Nooks, you might have 2 in the public cloud, you might have 1 in a bare metal data center. And all of those different servers could be in completely different geos. They all could have different execution layer clients. They all could have different consensus layer clients. And so all of a sudden, you've got this almost super resilient validator that would be very hard to go offline, because if you really can mix around with the distribution of these different qualities, it would be quite difficult to break the threshold. So I think that this is a really great thing. There's great security benefits, and it's really going to be helpful, I think, to the network overall as DVT is adopted at wider scale. And so number 3 is really that we need to battle test DVT on mainnet. I think the SSV and Obel teams have done a really tremendous job over the last couple of years developing these protocols, but they're very early in their mainnet ramping stages, and so we're getting there, and this is a great first way to use this with the protocol. So going to touch on the economic side here, because there's some different factors to consider with DVT versus running a solo validator, right? So the module calls for a 10% reward share, similar to the curated module. 2% of this would be the treasury share, and then there's an 8% module share. And so the module share is what goes to the node operators and DVT providers, and this compares to a 5% split for the curated module. So the thing that you really have to consider with a DVT validator, right? If you're a solo staker running a 32 ETH validator completely by yourself, like ballpark numbers, that's around $2,500 today, like USD. But if you now divide that by 7, it's not incredibly exciting to commit to like 3 years of running this, right? So by adding a little more of the incentive to the node operator side, that's quite helpful. And we're also going to talk a little bit more about this in the timeline, because there's another, I think, pretty exciting part of the economics to touch on. From the DVT provider side, so the Obel team will be receiving 1% of the rewards for the clusters that Obel participates in, and SSV will be receiving rewards via the SSV token or network fee. You can read more about how that works in the SSV documentation, but fairly smooth. And so both solutions we really want to be able to help support going forward, right? Because there's services to the modules, helping node operators troubleshoot. There's future development of DVT that we'd like to see, and both providers have like pretty ambitious roadmaps going forward. The next thing to talk about, and just sort of quickly, would be risk mitigation. So given that DVT is fairly new to mainnet, it's an early stage technology, the DAO considered in the vote different ways to mitigate this risk. And so 2 were considered. It was 1, using the existing Lido cover fund, and 2, using third-party cover. Would highly encourage you to check out the research proposal on the forums about this to see why, but the DAO did end up going with the cover fund to provide cover for this module. And then final point on this slide, so both Obel and SSV have both completed their first round of audits, and they've both committed to the DAO that they'll continue to update the DAO going forward as new additions to their protocols come into light. And so that's pretty encouraging as well. So, all right, the plan of action and timeline. So step 1 is now complete. That finished at the beginning of November when the vote successfully passed. There was about a 3.5-week discussion period for the DAO around the simple DVT module. It was a pretty interesting forum thread, and the vote successfully passed, right? So now we're on step 2, and very excited to say that the simple DVT module is actually deployed on Heski, and there's node operator entries created. We're in the process of getting the Obel clusters set up this week and last week, and hopefully by the end of this week actually really started and running validators. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Assuming that this all goes as planned, then the on-chain vote to add the second module will take place on-chain for mainnet. And then there's the addition of something called the Simple DVT Module Committee. And so this would be a multi-sig made up of Obel, SSV, Lido contributors, and member of the Lido Node Operator Subgovernance Group. So the Lido Node Operator Subgovernance Group is a subgroup of the DAO made up of multiple independent node operators, some Lido on Ethereum node operators, Lido on Polygon. These node operators would all collaborate with the performance criteria, which are all outlined in the forum proposal. These are things like making sure uptime is good, making sure the block proposal success rate is good, and through that, they'll start to add clusters to mainnet. And there will be a proposal to the DAO. The DAO will have a chance to sort of weigh in and have any feedback, but if that goes well, the Simple DVT Module Committee is responsible for creating the entries on mainnet so that there's an easy way to do this without, over the next couple months as we add more clusters, but it's still vetoable by the DAO, and then also raise key limits. Following this, there's a monitoring period for 30 days. We'll make sure everything is going well. If that goes well, then you'll go from 24 clusters to, let's say, 40, maybe 60 after that, after another 30 days, to really start scaling this, and each time hopefully bringing on many new node operators to participate, right? Next would be this step 7, and I'm pretty excited about this because I think it's quite cool. So if everything goes well, 3 months after deployment, you've added clusters, the validators are performing well, we're considering having, the LNSG should consider having, this term called Advanced Node Operator. And really all this is just a classification term to sort of differentiate, but what this would be a ton of solo stakers, hopefully, a ton of community stakers, professional node operators, all working together that have shown really good performance in the testnet, shown really good performance performance on mainnet. And if a cluster is made up of 50% plus advanced node operators, then they could be running something like 50 to 100 validators. And when you think about a solo staker that's joined this module, that's a pretty cool opportunity in my opinion. It's, I think we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm in the testnet so far. Finally, then you have the wind down period after 2 to 3 years. This will be replaced by scalable modules where there's no curation, there's none of this like process around it, right? You will have some way to participate permissionlessly. And there's a lot of discussion going on with the Obel and SSV around this. In addition to that, there's the community staking module. We'll touch on that at the end, but definitely check out Dimitri's talk tomorrow. So in terms of the testnet, you can see in the map here in the background, the highlighted countries are where we have about 60% of the node locations currently in the Obel testnet. Really exciting to see a lot of geodiversity here. There is currently 203 unique participants in this testnet. 60 of them are solo stakers, 65 of them are community stakers. Most of the community stakers are pretty much solo stakers as well. So it's been really exciting to have like broad participation within this so far. We have them around 32 clusters, each with a 5 of 7 threshold. So the clusters are in the process of getting their cluster config signed for Obel, and they're starting their DKG processes. I believe we have about 5 or 6 done when I looked earlier today. That should be wrapped up at the end of the week. Validators will go online, and then it starts a 45-day monitoring period. Following that, the SSV testnet will start at the beginning of next week. We expect an additional 100 plus unique participants. There's 224 total, so there's some repeats between both. And then testing will start soon after, again, a 45-day period. And this is also quite important because we'll test MEV Boost with both protocols for the first time and SSV's DKG for the first time as well. So finally, and definitely highly encourage you to pick up your phone, scan this QR code, right? If you're interested in participating, we're doing another set of testnets starting in early 2024. We'll be kicking off probably January. If you're a solo staker, if you're a community staker, if you're a professional node operator, like please sign up because the criteria to participate in testnet is really, really easy. All you need to do is basically set up an Obel node, set up an SSV node, run a validator, show proof that you participated, and we're like very happy to have you participate in testnet and go from there. And really what we're hoping to have is many highly performant participants eligible to participate in mainnet going forward. It could be anyone in this room. Like seriously, I'm not the most technical person. I could do this quite easily. So I really encourage you to. Finally, definitely check out the Lido booth. Tomorrow there's going to be a raffle. The time should actually be 5:45, but you can go there and someone will have the chance to win one of these beautiful Lido boxes. So thanks so much. Happy to take questions if there are any. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. That was great. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anything?
Maybe you could point out for the room what the difference between a solo and a community staker is, just to make it clear for everyone who's not familiar with the terms.
Yeah, sure. So community staker is generally the term that Lido uses for, or Lido contributors rather use for like groups of cluster participants who generally like work together, and this is quite common in DVT. So you may be like 2 friends that run a validator together and like practice together on testnet. You might just be a solo staker that's like part of some kind of affiliated group, but in general it's very similar to a solo staker or like a small org that is like friendly and like with each other.
Yeah, hello, thanks for the initiative. It looks all very exciting. Now that I see the boxes here on screen, is there any preference or any splits that you guys anticipate in onboarding new validators that run infrastructure from home rather than from data centers?
So the preference in general would be to have more solo stakers running from home. It was interesting to see that there's still probably about 15 to, it was like 8 to 15%, I believe, of the initial wave that applied to run boxes from home. There's quite a few that were running public cloud because it was easier to set up. But in general, there's no like target. What we're really trying to optimize for in terms of diversity is geography and really trying to get the client side done too. I think hardware is like the next step for us to focus on like going forward, and hopefully we'll see that as we bring on more solo stakers.
Any more questions? All right, well, let's give another round of applause for Will.
Thanks very much.